Guilt and Sorrow, or Incidents upon Salisbury Plain. Written between 1791 and 1794, by William Wordsworth. Parts of the original manuscript are missing, so the poem is read in its extant form. Hard is the life when naked and unhoused and wasted by the long day's fruitless pains. The hungry savage, mid deep forests, bruised by storms, lies down at night on unknown plains and lifts his head in fear, while famished trains of boars along the crashing forests prowl, and herd in darkness, as the rushing rains put out his watch-fire. Bears contending growl, and round his fenceless bed gaunt wolves in armies howl. Yet is he strong to suffer, and his mind encounters all his evils unsubdued, for happier days since at the breast he pined he never knew, and when by foes pursued with life he scarce has reached the fortress rude, while with the war songs peal the valleys shake. What in those wild assemblies has he viewed but men who all of his hard lot partake, repose in the same fear, to the same toil awake. The thoughts which bow the kindly spirits down and break the springs of joy, their deadly weight derive from memory of pleasures flown which haunts us in some sad reverse of fate, or from reflection on the state of those who on the couch of affluence rest by laughing fortune's sparkling cup elate, while we of comfort reft, by pain depressed, no other pillow know than penury's iron breast. Hence where refinement's genial influence calls the soft affections from their wintry sleep, and the sweet tear of love and friendship falls the willing heart in tender joy to steep, when men in various vessels roam the deep of social life, and turns of chance prevail various and sad, how many thousands weep beset with foes more fierce than e'er assail the savage without home in winter's keenest gale. The troubled west was red with stormy fire, o'er Saram's plain the traveller with a sigh measured each painful step, the distant spire that fixed at every turn his backward eye was lost, though still he turned, in the blank sky. By thirst and hunger pressed he gazed around, and scarce could any trace of man descry, save wastes of corn that stretched without a bound, but where the sower dwelt was nowhere to be found. No shade was there, no meads of pleasant green, no brook to wet his lips or soothe his ear. Huge piles of corn stack here and there were seen, but thence no smoke upbreathed his sight to cheer. And see the homeward shepherd dim appear far off, he stops his feeble voice to strain, no sound replies but winds that whistling near sweep the thin grass and passing, wildly plain, or desert lark that pours on high a wasted strain. Long had each slope he mounted seemed to hide some cottage whither his tired feet might turn, but now, all hope resigned, in tears he eyed the crows in blackening eddies homeward borne, then sought, in vain, a shepherd's lowly thorn or hovel from the storm to shield his head. On as he passed more wild and more forlorn and vacant the huge plain around him spread, ah me! The wet cold ground must be his only bed. Hurtle the rattling clouds together piled by fiercer gales, and soon the storm must break. He stood the only creature in the wild on whom the elements their rage could wreak, save that the bustard of those limits bleak, shy tenant, seeing their immortal wight at that dread hour, outsent a mournful shriek and half upon the ground, with strange affright, forced hard against the wind a thick unwieldy flight. The sun unheeded sunk, while on a mound he stands beholding with astonished gaze, frequent upon the deep entrenched ground, strange marks of mighty arms of former days. Then looking up at distance he surveys what seems an antique castle spreading wide. Hoary and naked are its walls and raise their brow sublime, while to those walls he hied a voice as from a tomb in hollow accents cried. Oh, from that mountain pile avert thy face, whiche'er betide at this tremendous hour. To hell's most cursed sprites the baleful place belongs, upreared by their magic power. Though mixed with flame rush down the crazing shower, and o'er thy naked bed the thunder roll fly, ere the fiends their prey unwares devour, or grinning, on thy endless tortures scowl, till very madness seem a mercy to thy soul. For oft at dead of night, when dreadful fire reveals that powerful circles reddening stones, mid priests and spectres grim and idols dire, far heard the great flame utters human moans, then all is hushed, again the desert groans, a dismal light its farthest bounds illumes, while warrior spectres of gigantic bones, forth issuing from 1,000 rifted tombs, wheel on their fiery steeds amid the infernal glooms. The voice was from beneath, but face or form he saw not, mocked as by a hideous dream. 3 hours he wildered through the watery storm, no moon to open the black clouds and stream from narrow gulf profound one friendly beam, no watchdog howled from shepherd's homely shed. Once did the lightning's pale abortive beam disclose a naked guide-post's double head, sole object where he stood had day its radiance spread. 'Twas dark and waste as ocean's shipless flood, roaring with storms beneath night's starless gloom, where the wet gypsy in her straw-built home warmed her wet limbs by fire of fern and broom. No transient meteor burst upon his sight, nor taper glimmered dim from sick man's room. Along the moor no line of mournful light from lamp of lonely toll gate streamed athwart the night. At length, deep hid in clouds, the moon arose and spread a sickly glare. With flight unwilled, worn out and wasted, wishing the repose of death, he came where antient vows fulfilled, kind pious hands did to the Virgin build a lonely spittle, the belated swain from the night terrors of that waste to shield. But there no human being could remain, and now the walls are named the dead house of the plain. Till then as if his terror dogged his road he fled, and often backward cast his face, and when the ambiguous gloom that ruin showed, how glad he was at length to find a place that bore of human hands the cheering trace, here shall he rest till morn her eye unclose. Ah me! That last of hopes is fled apace, for, entering in, his hair in horror rose to hear a voice that seemed to mourn in sorrow's throes. It was the voice of one that sleeping mourned, a human voice. And soon his terrors fled. At dusk a female wanderer hither turned and found a comfortless half-sheltered bed. The moon a wan dead light around her shed, he waked her and at once her spirits failed, thrilled by the poignant dart of sudden dread, for of that ruin she had heard a tale that might with a child's fears the stoutest heart assail. Had heard of one who forced from storms to shroud felt the loose walls of this decayed retreat rock to his horse's neighings shrill and loud, while the ground rang by ceaseless pawing beat, till on a stone that sparkled to his feet struck and still struck again the troubled horse. The man half raised that stone by pain and sweat, half raised, for well his arm might lose its force, disclosing the grim head of a new murdered corse. Such tales of the lone spittle she had learned, and when that shape with eyes in sleep half drowned by the moon's sullen lamp she scarce discerned, cold stony horror all her senses bound. But he to her low words of cheering sound addressed. With joy she heard such greeting kind, and much they conversed of that desert ground, which seemed to those of other worlds consigned, whose voices still they heard as paused the hollow wind. The woman told that through a hollow deep as on she journeyed, far from spring or bower, an old man beckoning from the naked steep came tottering sidelong down to ask the hour. There never clock was heard from steeple tower. From the wide corn the plundering crows to scare he held a rusty gun. In sun and shower, old as he was, alone he lingered there, his hungry meal too scant for dog that meal to share. Much of the wonders of that boundless heath he spoke, and of a swain who far astray reached unawares a height and saw beneath gigantic beings ranged in dread array. Such beings thwarting oft the traveller's way with shield and stone axe stride across the wold. Or, throned on that dread circle's summit grey of mountains hung in air, their state unfold, and like 1,000 gods mysterious counsel hold. And oft a night fire mounting to the clouds reveals the desert and with dismal red clothes the black bodies of encircling crowds. It is the sacrificial altar fed with living men. How deep it groans, the dead thrilled in their yawning tombs their helms uprear, the sword that slept beneath the warrior's head thunders in fiery air, red arms appear uplifted through the gloom and shake the rattling spear. Not thus where clear moons spread their pleasing light. Long bearded forms with wands uplifted show to vast assemblies, while each breath of night is hushed, the living fires that bright and slow rounding th' ethereal field in order go. Then as they trace with all their various files all figured on the mystic plain below, still prelude of sweet sounds the moon beguiles and charmed for many a league the hoary desert smiles. While thus they talk the churlish storms relent, and round those broken walls the dying wind in feeble murmurs told his rage was spent. With sober sympathy and tranquil mind gently the woman 'gan her wounds unbind. Might beauty charm the canker worm of pain the rose on her sweet cheek had ne'er declined, moved she not once the prime of Keswick's plain while hope and love and joy composed her smiling train. Like swans, twin swans, that when on the sweet brink of Derwent's stream the south winds hardly blow, mid Derwent's water lilies swell and sink in union, rose her sister breasts of snow, fair emblem of two lovers' hearts that know no separate impulse, or like infants played, like infants strangers yet to pain and woe. Unwearied hope to tend their motions made long vigils, and delight her cheek between them laid. And are ye spread ye glittering dews of youth for this, that frost may gall the tender flower in joy's fair breast with more untimely tooth? Unhappy man! Thy sole delightful hour flies first, it is thy miserable dower only to taste of joy that thou mayst pine a loss, which rolling suns shall ne'er restore. New suns roll on and scatter as they shine no second spring, but pain, till death release thee, thine. By Derwent's side my father's cottage stood, the mourner thus her artless story told. A little flock and what the finny flood supplied, to him were more than mines of gold. Light was my sleep, my days in transport rolled, with thoughtless joy I stretched along the shore my parents' nets, or watched, when from the fold high o'er the cliffs I led his fleecy store, a dizzy depth below. His boat and twinkling oar. Can I forget my seat beneath the thorn my garden stored with peas and mint and thyme, and rose and lily for the Sabbath mom, the church inviting bells delightful chime, the merriment and song at shearing time, my hen's rich nest with long grass overgrown, the cowslip gathering at the morning prime, the hazel copse with teeming clusters brown. Can I forget the casement where I fed the red breast when the fields were whitened or, my snowy kerchiefs on the hawthorn spread my humming wheel and glittering table store, the well-known knocking at the evening door, the hunted slipper and the blinded game, the dance that loudly beat the merry floor, the ballad chaunted round the brightening flame while down the ravaged hills the storm unheeded came. The sons of 18 summers danced along joyous as in the pleasant morn of May. At last by cruel chance and wilful wrong my father's substance fell into decay. Oppression trampled on his tresses grey, his little range of water was denied, even to the bed where his old body lay his all was seized, and weeping side by side turned out on the cold winds, alone we wandered wide. Can I forget that miserable hour when from the last hilltop my sire surveyed, peering above the trees, the steeple tower that on his marriage day sweet music made? There at my birth my mother's bones were laid, and there, till then, he hoped his own might rest. Bidding me trust in God he stood and prayed, I could not pray, by human grief oppressed, viewing our glimmering cot through tears that never ceased. There was a youth whose tender voice and eye mitred fresh happiness to happiest days. At uprise of the sun when he was by the birds prolonged with joy their choicest lays, the soft pipe warbled out a wilder maze, the silent moon of evening, hung above, showered through the waving lime trees mellow arrays, warm was the breath of night, his voice of love charmed the rude winds to sleep by river, field or grove. His father bid him to a distant town to ply remote from groves the artist's trade. What tears of bitter grief till then unknown, what tender vows our last sad kiss delayed. To him our steps we turned, by hope upstayed. Oh, with what bliss upon his neck I wept, and her whom he had loved in joy, he said, he well could love in grief. His faith he kept, and sheltered from the winds once more my father slept. 4 years each day with daily bread was blessed, by constant toil and constant prayer supplied. 3 lovely infants lay within my breast, and often viewing their sweet smiles I sighed and knew not why. My happy father died just as the children's meal began to fail. For war the nations to the field defied. The loom stood still, unwatched, the idle gale wooed in deserted shrouds the unregarding sail. How changed at once! For labor's cheerful hum silence and fear, and misery's weeping train. But soon with proud parade the noisy drum beat round to sweep the streets of want and pain. My husband's arms now only served to strain me and his children hungering in his view. He could not beg, my prayers and tears were vain, to join those miserable men he flew. We reached the western world a poor devoted crew. O dreadful price of being! To resign all that is dear in being, better far in want's most lonely cave till death to pine unseen, unheard, unwatched by any star. Better before proud fortune's sumptuous car obvious our dying bodies to obtrude, than dog-like wading at the heels of war protract a cursed existence with the brood that lap, their very nourishment, their brother's blood. The pains and plagues that on our heads came down, disease and famine, agony and fear, in wood or wilderness, in camp or town, it would thy brain unsettle even to hear. All perished, all in one remorseless year, husband and children one, by sword and scourge of fiery fever, every tear dried up, despairing, desolate. On board a British ship I waked as from a trance restored. Here paused she of all present thought forlorn, living once more those hours that sealed her doom. Meanwhile he looked and saw the smiling morn all unconcerned with their unrest resume her progress through the brightening eastern gloom. Oh, when shall such fair hours their gleams bestow to bid the grave its opening clouds illume? Fled each fierce blast and a hellish fiend, and lo! Day fresh from ocean wave uprears his lovely brow. Oh come, he said, come after weary night so ruinous far the scene to view. So forth she came and eastward looked. The sight o'er her moist eyes meek dawn of gladness threw that tinged with faint red smile her faded hue. Not lovelier did the morning star appear parting the lucid mist and bathed in dew, the whilst her comrade to her pensive cheer tempered sweet words of hope, and the lark warbled near. They looked and saw a lengthening road and wain descending a bare slope not far remote. The downs all glistered dropped with freshening rain, the carman whistled loud with cheerful note, the cock scarce heard at distance sounds his throat, but town or farm or hamlet none they viewed, only were told there stood a lonely cot full 2 miles distant. Then, while they pursued their journey, her sad tale the mourner thus renewed. Peaceful as this immeasurable plain by these extended beams of dawn impressed, in the calm sunshine slept at the glittering main. The very ocean has its hour of rest ungranted to the human mourner's breast. Remote from man and storms of mortal care, with wings which did the world of waves invest, the Spirit of God diffused through balmy air quiet that might have healed, if aught could heal, despair. Ah! How unlike each smell, each sight and sound that late the stupor of my spirit broke. Of noisome hospitals the groan profound, the mine's dire earthquake, the bomb's thunder-stroke, heart-sickening famine's grim despairing look, the midnight flames in thundering deluge spread, the stormed town's expiring shriek that woke far round the grisly phantoms of the dead, and pale with ghastly light the victor's human head. Some mighty gulf of separation past I seemed transported to another world, a dream resigned with pain when from the mast the impatient mariner the sail unfurled, and whistling called the wind that hardly curled the silent seas. The pleasant thoughts of home with tears his weather-beaten cheek impearled, for me, farthest from earthly port to Rome was best, my only wish to shun where man might come. And oft, robbed of my perfect mind, I thought at last my feet a resting place had found. Here will I weep in peace, so fancy wrought, roaming the illimitable waters round, here gaze, of every friend but death disowned, all day, my ready tomb the ocean flood. To break my dream the vessel reached its bound and homeless near 1,000 homes I stood, and near 1,000 tables pined and wanted food. 3 years a wander around my native coast my eyes have watched yon sun declining tend down to the land where hope to me was lost, and now across this waste my steps I bend, oh! Tell me whither, for no earthly friend have I, no house in prospect but the tomb. She ceased. The city's distant spires ascend like flames which far and wide the west illume, scattering from out the sky the rear of night's thin gloom. Along the fiery east the sun, a show more gorgeous still, pursued his proud career. But human sufferings and that tale of woe had dimmed the traveller's eye with pity's tear, and in the youthful mourner's doom severe he half forgot the terrors of the night, striving with counsel sweet her soul to cheer, her soul for ever widowed of delight. He too had withered young in sorrow's deadly blight. But now from a hill summit down they look where through a narrow valley's pleasant scene a wreath of vapour tracked a winding brook babbling through groves and lawns and meads of green. A smoking cottage peeped the trees between, the woods resound the linnet's amorous lays, and melancholy lowings intervene of scattered herds that in the meadows graze, while through the furrowed grass the merry milkmaid strays. Adieu ye friendless hope-forsaken pair. Yet friendless ere ye take your several road, enter that lowly cot and ye shall share comforts by prouder mansions unbestowed. For you yon milkmaid bears her brimming load, for you the board is piled with homely bread, and think that life is like this desert broad, where all die, happiest find is but a shed and a green spot mid wastes interminably spread. Though from huge wickers paled with circling fire no longer horrid shrieks and dying cries to ears of demon gods in peals aspire, to demon gods a human sacrifice, though treachery her sword no longer dies in the cold blood of truce, still, reason's ray, what does it more than while the tempests rise, with starless glooms and sounds of loud dismay, reveal with stillborn glimpse the terrors of our way. For proof, if man thou lovest, turn thy eye on realms which least the cup of misery taste. For want how many men and children die. How many at oppression's portal placed receive the scanty dole she cannot waste, and bless, as she has taught, her hand benign. How many by inhuman toil debased, abject, obscure, and brute to earth incline unrespited, forlorn of every spark divine. Nor only is the walk of private life unblessed by justice and the kindly train of peace and truth, while injury and strife, outrage and deadly hate usurp their reign, from the pale line to either frozen main the nations, though at home in bonds they drink the dregs of wretchedness, for empire strain, and crushed by their own fetters helpless sink, move their galled limbs in fear and each silent sink. Lo! Where the sun exulting in his might in haste the fiery top of Andes scales and flings deep silent floods of purple light down to the sea through long Peruvian vales, at once 1,000 streams and gentle gales start from their slumber breathing scent and song. But now no joy of man or woman hails that star as once, ere with him came the throng of furies and grim death by avarice lashed along. Oh that a slave who on his naked knees weeps tears of fear at superstition's nod, should rise a monster tyrant and o'er seas and mountains stretch so far his cruel rod to bruise meek nature in her lone abode. Is it for this the planet of the pole sends, through the storms its steadfast light abroad? Through storms we ride with misery to her goal, nor star nor needle know the tempests of the soul. How changed that paradise, those happy bounds where once through his own groves the Hindu strayed, no more the voice of jocund toil resounds along the crowded banyan's high arcade. How weak the solace such fond thoughts afford, when with untimely stroke the virtuous bleed. Say, rulers of the nations, from the sword can aught but murder, pain, and tears proceed. Oh! What can war but endless war still breed? Or whence but from the labours of the sage can poor benighted mortals pin the meed of happiness and virtue, how assuage but by his gentle words their self-consuming rage? Insensate they who think, at wisdom's porch that exile, terror, bonds, and force may stand, that truth with human blood can feed her torch, and justice balance with her gory hand scales whose dire weights of human heads demand a Nero's arm. Must law with iron scourge still torture crimes that grew a monstrous band formed by his care, and still his victim urge, with voice that breathes despair, to death's tremendous verge? Who fierce on kingly crowns hurled his own lightning blaze. Heroes of truth pursue your march, uptear the oppressor's dungeon from its deepest base, high o'er the towers of pride undaunted rear resistless in your might the Herculean mace of reason, let foul error's monster race dragged from their dens dart at the light with pain and die, pursue your toils, till not a trace be left on earth of superstition's reign, save that eternal pile which frowns on Saram's plain.